Hello, and thank you for tuning in. This is People Aren't Media, Why You Should Delete Your Social Media Now, a remediation of my argumentative essay for Enc1101. To start, social media is everywhere. It comes in the form of Twitter memes. It comes in the form of YouTube videos. That's actually me in high school. Yeah, you can see why that wasn't a career. And it can come in the form of Instagram posts. So when a lot of people think of social media, they tend to think of it like this. You know, it brings people together. It's all over us, but that's not a bad thing. However, those people would be wrong. Just because social media is so pervasive does not mean it's good for people. What social media is actually doing is making you impatient, draconian, and bellicose. So the purpose of my presentation is to show how social media makes you this way and try to convince you to delete your accounts. So the first thing social media does is it makes you rude. This guy right here is Jaron Lanier, and despite looking like the guitarist for Five Finger Death Punch, he was actually an early pioneer in the field of virtual reality. He has a really good book that I encourage you to check out called 10 Arguments for Deleting Your Social Media Accounts Right Now, and in it, he puts it very simply. The reason for this is Lanier says that social media makes you into an addict. And when you become an addict, there's an ignorance, a fetish for exaggeration, that by all appearances is a cover for profound insecurity. A personal mythology overtakes addicts. They see themselves grandiosely, and as they descend further into addiction, ever less realistically. The best example of this, to me, is an online argument. So you see this all the time on Facebook or Twitter, where both people on opposite sides of the argument see themselves like this. But what they're closer to is this. So the reason for this is both what's detailed in Jaron Lanier's book, as well as supported by an article by Amanda Bahan called It's Not Just Bad Behavior, Why Social Media Design Makes It Hard to Have Constructive Arguments Online. In it, she took a survey of 257 people, one of which said that they felt it was hard to be vulnerable because they had an audience, the rest of their Facebook friends. And another one admitted that on Facebook, sometimes you don't admit your failures because other people are looking. So, much like this picture, a lot of internet fights start because people have unrealistic, ideals of themselves. I'm sure both of these guys, Double D and Jimmy, think they can just, go to town on the other guy and it'll be over quick. But they're not really getting anything done. They're not actually looking at or understanding each other. And at the end of the day, nothing really changes. It creates a vicious cycle that only ends when one person truly hits rock bottom. People become sadistic on social media and very rarely change. A almost extension of this cruelty is that people on social media become draconian. They are constantly accusing, pointing the fingers, and trying to condemn somebody for one perceived slight sin or wrongdoing or another. Reporter John Ronson goes over this phenomena in his book So You've Been Publicly Shamed. And in it, he states that social media is a giant echo chamber, where what we believe is constantly reinforced by people who believe the same thing. This basically just amplifies any distaste that you have for a person or an idea or a position in an argument. And Bahan supports this by stating in her article that it is difficult to engage in good faith disagreements on the internet, and people reach less common ground online compared with face-to-face disagreements. Ronson asserts that because of this, no one on social media has any chance at the real story, which causes normal people's lives to be ruined for a small transgression, and it creates a more conformist conservative age. And this is because the threat of getting decimated by an online mob leads to nobody really wanting to say anything of substance. You wouldn't want to offend or step on toes, or, just say something out of turn, and then your whole life's over. Jaron Lanier puts it really well, where he says that in order to avoid falling into asshole behavior, you had to make yourself fake nice. You'd have to be saccharine polite, constantly choosing your words super carefully, walking on eggshells. It leaves no room for forgiveness, and actually makes a lot of people online similar to this. And I think the best metaphor for this is that people online are more commonly like this. So some of you in true crime might recognize this guy. This is the BTK killer, who was noted not only for just being kind of the worst and a particularly terrible poet, but also if you looked at him, he looked like every 70s dad. That's him on the left. But on the right, you can see the safest possible image I could put in a school presentation of what he was doing after hours. And if you'd like to know why he's called the BTK killer, research that in your own time. So what I'm getting at, though, is that this is what social media makes you. And a big reason for this is that social media, as well as making you, addict with draconian tendencies, it also completely erodes your patience. And this is proved in a paper in Experimental and Clinical Psychopharmacology called Supplemental Material for Reinforcer Pathology of Internet-Related Behaviors Among College Students, Data from 6 countries. I'm going to give you a sec to digest what all that is. And then in this paper, social media is labeled as a pattern of addictive behavior that can be understood as a reinforcer pathology, defined by a strong preference for the immediately available addictive commodity compared to the alternative delayed reinforcers. This overvaluation is most likely when the addictive commodity is characterized by high levels of immediate reward and delayed cost, among individuals with greater preference for immediate rewards compared to delayed rewards, and in a context devoid of alternatives. So it's a lot like this. Social media gives you all the foods that taste super good. Your onion rings, fries, hot dogs. I think I even see a piece of red velvet cake, which would clash with all the stuff on there, but I digress. And, it's a constant stream of everything that tastes good and is bad for you. And what that can lead to is that you don't need to have the patience to understand other people. You don't need to have the patience to, see the gray in a situation or see someone else's side. You go from being this to this. Now, there are going to be those that have their objections to these arguments. They'll say that, well, hey, man, social media brings people together. It's a lot like this picture, People of all sorts of creeds looking at this kind of homey DIY construct that is social media. There's a big problem with this, though, and it's best exemplified by Facebook. So Facebook is the most widely used social network site globally, with 2.6 billion monthly active users in April 2020. That's taken from a paper in the Journal on Psychosocial Research on Cyberspace. So the purpose of that article, or to quote that article, is to both give you context on Facebook as well as give you the average number in the study of people's Facebook friends. So what do you think that number is? It's actually about 394 people. Now, this is butting up against this number. So Dunbar's number is defined by a dictionary of media and communications as the maximum size of a stable social group in which all of the members know each other. Robin Dunbar, an archaeologist, hypothesized this number in the 1990s, that it as about 150, and that's limited by your cognitive capacity. So we as humans, according to Dunbar's number, don't even really have the ability to have more than 150 close connections. That's a lot more than the 150, and I know that's not, amongst my friends, even the typical amount of Facebook friends. So with Dunbar's number, all those supposed, friends and contacts and people in my group are actually a lot closer to this. They're pelts on a wall. They're not people. They're just conquest in the gladiatory arena that is social media. So while the argument can be made on the surface that social media brings people closer together, in reality, it actually just gives you more stuff to clutter up your mind with. Now, I know social media is very, very pervasive in today's world, and getting rid of it can feel like this. But I think it's very important to do that, because in getting rid of social media, you get back the ability to see people for what they are, which is as people and not a piece of media.